Hey, what is up mortals? It's Edward Sale here, and before we get in today's video, there is something I'd like to say. I'd like to let you all know that we have a merch store. Some of the items in it are only available for a limited amount of time, so if you're interested, go into the description and check it out. Each purchase helps us make more content. Secondly, if this video hits 300 likes by the end of the week, we will continue this what if. Thirdly, if you didn't know, only 41.3% of you guys are subscribed to us. So please hit that subscribe button and click the bell icon. Now with that out of the way, let's get into the story. It all went dark for Midoriya. The last thing he remembered was trying to run to Uraraka's aid before the floor beneath him crumbled. As the concrete caved in, the boy was buried beneath piles of rubble. Did Uraraka manage to win out? Did she fail too? All he knew was Shoto was probably laughing about this, if only internally. He was aware that his adoptive brother never wore his emotions on his sleeves if it wasn't contempt. Midoriya woke up in a room he had never seen before. He was lying on a hospital bed, but he very much knew he wasn't at a hospital. As he gathered his bearings, he inspected himself to see what the extent of the damage was. Surprisingly, despite the soreness, he didn't look too beaten up. In fact, if he didn't know any better, he'd think he was simply dreaming that he failed the test. This must be the nurse's office, the boy thought to himself. He tried to sit up, but any time he did, he felt a sharp pain shoot through his cranium. It didn't take long for him to resign and lay back down on the bed. A couple of seconds later, he heard the bell on the door jingle. Someone had come in, evidenced by the footsteps approaching his bed. He turned to his side to see a short, old woman wearing medical clothing over her hero's uniform.
"You're awake! How about that?"
The elder woman exclaimed. She made her way to the side of the bed.
"You've been out cold for a while now, young man."
Midoriya recognized her much quicker than he did with Aizawa. He gave her a smile, though it was a mirthless smirk. Pain aside, the sight of all these heroes, even All Might, made him reflect back on the night of Inko's death, though he'd figured it'd be rude to take that out on them.
"Hello, recovery girl."
Midoriya responded. His voice was quiet and soft, due to being exhausted. Recovery Girl's quirk really did a number on what was left on his stamina. Midoriya stammered, trying to find the words to ask the school nurse.
"Did we pass? Me and my friend, do you think we passed?"
He had no idea why he still held out hope for that. Maybe it was because he felt that she didn't deserve to be dragged down with him. The elder hero turned towards him with a strained face. Midoriya already knew it wasn't good, though he listened to what she had to say.
"Sorry, kid. Time ran out shortly after you got yourself buried."
Midoriya held his forehead. He was deeply ashamed of himself for this. Not only did his anger towards his lifelong rival cost him the test, but he also dragged his teammate down with him too. A part of the test was to act like a hero, not just to capture the bad guys. And at that moment, the green-haired boy hadn't acted very heroic. With a sigh, Midoriya sunk further back into his pillow. He reflected on his own self-dissatisfaction. Meanwhile, the test had continued in the green-haired boy's absence. Everyone had gone and done their test. Shoto, as expected, passed with flying colors after having frozen his opponents in place, so that he and his teammate could secure the bomb. The students were so caught up in their own tests, they had completely forgotten about Midoriya. For the most part, in regard to the tests, it was anyone's fight. Everyone was surprisingly skilled enough to stand toe-to-toe with each other, relatively even, barring Shoto, of course. This was until it was time for Team G and Team C to go against each other. Kaminari and Jiro versus Yaoyorozu and Zaiku. Yaoyorozu had begun preparations by creating metal plates to barricade the doors with.
"It shouldn't take long for Kaminari to arrive. I suggest we fortify ourselves in here to run out the timer,"
Yaoyorozu said. Her teammate took a second to ponder this strategy. He cocked his head to the side before speaking up. "You only mentioned Kaminari. What of his teammate?" Zaiku queried.
"Jiro? I doubt she'll join him. She didn't display any sort of special offensive capabilities during the quirk apprehension test."
That was all the information he needed. With a few brisk steps, Zaiku placed his hand on his opponent's shoulder, startling her with his speed. "Then there's no need for us both to be here. Stand aside, and I can handle this." Zaiku's tone of voice increased in intensity, though not in volume. It took on a more assertive tone than his usual cold, disinterested inflection. While this authoritative voice had taken Yaoyorozu aback,
She stepped forward to try and talk the taller student out of his apparent plan to attack. Wait, we're supposed to stay here and defend the bomb. Yayurozu protested. There are two ways we can win this. We can either hold up here, or I can go out there and take the fight to them. We won't win this through attrition. Zaiku paused, taking this moment to turn towards his teammate. But rather through a show of force. That cold phrase was enough to send chills through the spines of anyone who witnessed it, even All Mights. The number one hero felt a pit grow in his stomach as his feelings of uneasiness about his student only became more intense. Even the normally unflappable Shoto, who couldn't even be bothered to wear his emotions on his sleeves, reeled back after hearing this. The students began chatting amongst themselves, debating on who is scarier between Zaiku and Midoriya. The sheer vehemence emanating from his words was enough to make almost anyone submit. Seeing no other choice, Yayurozu stepped away from the door, allowing her partner to step through without another word. Before we get back into the story, I would like to say that we've got a second channel called Anime Deep Dive. Anime Deep Dive goes over the hard facts of the anime presented. Now, in case you guys didn't know, we have a third channel called We the Celestial Naruto What If. We the Celestial Naruto What If mainly focuses on our Naruto What If series. If you're interested in content like this, please go check the description below or click the eye icon in the top right corner. Now with that out of the way, let's get back into the story. Meanwhile, marching down the hallway was the hyperactive, if not the slightly dim, Kaminari. His lips curled into a cocky smirk as electricity crackled across his right forearm. Clearly he had thought that his test would be a lot easier than it would turn out to be. As he scoured the halls looking for the room with the bomb, he noticed the air pressure around him changed slightly. As if on instinct, Kaminari leapt to the side, as if he were trying to avoid something. Sure enough, a hole was placed in the wall behind the blonde kid, causing pieces of the debris to shoot out from the damaged cavity in the concrete barrier. Spinning around, Kaminari locked his eyes with his opponent, Zaiku. The pale student had his arm pointed at Kaminari. The yellow-haired boy scoffed, attempting to maintain some amount of self-confidence. That's some gnarly quirk you got there, Kaminari remarked. Nearly took my head off with that. Wasn't my intent. Zaiku retorted, his voice reflecting some amount of indifference. However, I am a villain, so don't be surprised if the next one does. Kaminari took a step back. Either this kid was committed to the act of being a villain, or he really did intend to grievously harm the blonde. Kaminari raised his hands, his arms sparking with electricity. Look, I already know the secret behind your quirk, Kaminari stated. I basically already won, dude. You should just go, man. Kaminari had hoped that this would somehow be enough to ward off his opponent. He had hoped that this would bide some sort of time, though even he knew these were lackluster attempts at intimidation. Lowering his right arm, Zaiku glowered at his adversary. Then perhaps I should change it up a bit. Pointing his hands towards the ground, he shot electricity through the floor. In any other case, that would have been a sure hit. Zaiku, however, jumped upward. While this would normally be a futile attempt at avoiding getting hit, the white-haired boy didn't seem to come back down. As if he were personally insulting the notion of gravity itself, he remained in the air, standing on it as if it were a solid surface. This sight was enough to distract and stun the blonde. As far as everyone else was aware, he could only shoot pressurized air pockets from his hands. After what seemed like an eternity of silence, Kaminari spoke up. What the hell? How are you? Kaminari trailed off. His electricity started to fizzle out as he started to dribble over himself. He held his lightning for too long, and as such, his brain was starting to feel the adverse effects. In a matter of seconds, Zaiku was looming over the now helpless Kaminari. Pointing his arm at him once more, the air around his hand began to visibly distort. It began to click in All Might's head why this boy seemed so familiar. But before he could fully register what this all meant, a loud blast emitted from the speakers, and the screens went to static. Everyone was frozen in their tracks, unsure what to do. Slowly All Might leaned in close to the microphone. His breaths were haggard and uneven. Kaminari? All Might murmured out. All that responded was the low drone of TV static. The only thing that scared these students as much as the prospect of their peer getting seriously injured, or worse, even, was the fact that their symbol of peace was shaken this much. Noticing his obvious anxiety was startling the students, All Might tried to change his tone to something more assertive. Denki Kaminari, respond immediately! Once again, all that grazed their ears was static. After what felt like years of silence, All Might began sprinting out of the room. He headed towards the test area, not sure what to expect. For the first time in years, All Might had felt dread, and it felt like it was pooling into his stomach. However, when he arrived, all he was met with were two students, both of whom were dumbfounded with tape around their arms. That kid, Jiro muttered to herself. He's something else entirely. A wave of relief washed over All Might. Even looking at the building, there was no apparent damage outside of the hole in the wall. The rest of the students caught up with All Might, the same relief washing over them. Even Bakugo seemed to relax a little. As if on cue, Zaiku and Yaoyorozu emerged from the building. The dark-haired girl looked annoyed, mainly at the fact that her making all that metal meant nothing at this point. What was the point of even making those steel plates if you were just going to go rogue and do your own thing? Yaoyorozu rebuked. Perhaps you should have discussed with me before making them then. Zaiku responded with an uncharacteristically air of snark. So now you're all about teamwork? The proper girl retaliated, the annoyance in her voice being more apparent. Zaiku opened his mouth to say something else, but was cut off by All Might.
Young Zaiku!
All Might called out. Despite the perpetual smile, he was clearly annoyed. He marched over to Zaiku, intending to have a stern conversation with the boy.
You do realize what you did was overboard, don't you?
Zaiku, despite his normally icy look, was confused by this statement. He remained silent for the moment before responding to the towering hero. Might I inquire as to what I did that was overboard? Zaiku questioned.
Duh!
All Might stammered, the boy's visible obliviousness taking the pro aback.
The air bullet you sent at Kaminari over there. He was already impaired.
Zaiku was only more confused by this statement, his emotionless glare being replaced with a more quizzical look. You didn't see me use the air bullet to launch Kaminari towards me? Zaiku asked. I used a controlled blast to send him towards me. I wasn't aware if he was just playing dumb or... Zaiku trailed off as he looked towards Kaminari, who was still drooling over himself and muttering nonsense.
No, I didn't catch that. Considering you blew out the cameras.
All Might responded, his tone of voice still firm. Zaiku placed a finger on his chin as he had thought about what All Might was telling him. At that moment, it seemed to click with the boy. I see, Zaiku stated, bowing his head. I apologize if I caused any sort of worry. All Might wasn't expecting compliance from this boy. He couldn't detect any sort of malice in his voice, but he still couldn't read the boy. He didn't know what the boy was trying to convey for that matter, considering the flatness of Zaiku's voice.
Well, just...
All Might paused for a second.
Just be more mindful next time.
Zaiku raised his head, his eyes meeting with All Might's. He retained his poker face as his gaze met the number one hero's. I look forward to learning under you, All Might. With that, Zaiku walked away. Most of his peers assumed he had gone back to the classroom, as when they went back, his stuff was gone. Meanwhile, Midori had just left the nurse's office. His wounds still hurt like nothing he'd ever experienced, but he was grateful that he was in walking condition. As he started to walk home, he heard a familiar voice call out to him. Hey, Deku! Uraraka hollered, much to Midoriya's confusion. Midoriya turned to meet Uraraka, who was walking over to him with her usual cheery face. Uraraka? You're not? The green-haired boy stammered, both out of confusion and out of personal shame. You're not mad at me at all? Right after he asked, Uraraka delivered a mean slap upside his head, jolting Midoriya forward. I was, dillweed! You cost us the test! Midoriya rubbed the back of his head as Uraraka sighed, collecting herself and her thoughts. But I understand why you were upset. So how about we call that even? The plucky brunette said, her tone softening to a friendlier tone. She flashed a smile at Midoriya, to which he reciprocated, though it was a more embarrassed smile. Yeah, Midoriya murmured, his tone reflecting his self-consciousness. Sorry. The next day, Midoriya and Uraraka walked to class together. Shoto had gone to school earlier to make use of the training field to be more effective with his quirk. However, when they went to class, they were met with something truly unexpected. Hey guys! Toru exclaimed. She sounded happy to be back. Everyone was confused, but mostly happy that she was back. She seemed distraught when she got expelled. Shortly after Midoriya and Uraraka got to class, their teacher, Aizawa, stepped in.
Right, everyone, in your seats.
Aizawa announced, his voice still a dull drone.
As you all can see, we have a returning student.
Yes, why is this? Did you not say that anyone who failed would be expelled? Ida queried. Their irritable teacher sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose.
I was gonna get to that before you interrupted.
Aizawa responded. The schoolboy's face was flushed. He had just interrupted a teacher, one of the many school-related things he vowed to himself that he would never do.
Anyways, I hope you realize that I don't actually expel my students. I send them home so they can reflect and learn from their mistakes. In Toru Hagugara's case, she seemed to learn in record time.
Aizawa stated.
Out there, it would be illogical of anyone to send someone with a useless quirk after hardened criminals. But
Aizawa sighed, his lethargy beginning to get the better of him.
A quirk is only as useful as you let it be.
The students began chatting amongst themselves again, though a lot of it was also praise directed at Aizawa.
I knew you were secretly a cool guy, Mr. Aizawa.
Kirishima chortled. After a while, it became a discussion on who would be best suited for class representative. Ida suggested that they hold an election, to which he won by a thin margin. Midoriya was just happy to be involved. It seemed like the first time that he could just be a part of normal school activities. Meanwhile, however, there was someone watching their school intently. Behind the crowds of demanding news reporters clamoring to just get one interview with the now teacher, All Might, was a man with unbridled hatred for the pro-hero. He wore a full black jumpsuit, exposing only his head and his hands. His face was tired and restless, with wrinkles and scars blemishing his face. He began scratching at his neck as he thought about All Might.
No matter what it takes, All Might,
the man rasped.
I will get you.
Thank you all for watching the video to the end. Now there are a few more things that I'd like to go over before the video ends. On behalf of We the Celestials, I'd like to thank the writer of this video and the editors for this video. Their details will be in the description. On behalf of We the Celestials, I'd like to thank the writer of this video and the editors for this video. Their details will be in the description. If you're a voice actor, editor, or writer, or you're interested in becoming one of those, go to the Discord that is in the description of this video and hit up the head of one of those areas. We're always looking for members to join us. That's it from us for today's video, so thank you all for watching, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're interested, and hit that like button if you liked the video. Until next time, peace out mortals, have a fantastic day.